James, thanks for doing this. It's great to meet you, and appreciate you taking the time.
It's a pleasure, Mike. There's one thing. I've got this massive bar across my head. What picture? It seems to be filming the device. Hang on,
No, I think you're
video.
okay.
Oops.
Yep, I think you're. No, you're fine.
You sure?
Yeah.
Because it'd be awful. I mean, it'd be tragic if the top of my head was cut off.
No, not at all.
Uh,
I can see your whole head. You're good.
okay. Um.
We're good because we're recording. Do I need to?
No, 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 you don't.
Yeah,
No, no, that's
yeah, yeah,
good.
yeah, yeah. No, I can see you. I can see the head. I can see your window, the trees.
Okay.
Uh,
Good.
but I appreciate you doing this.
Hey, Mike, it's an absolute pleasure. I do quite a lot of podcasts of my own, but it's rare that I get. It's not that I don't want to. I love going on other people's podcasts, but I'm so sketchy that they rarely are able to pin me down to a time.
Sketchy because you're just all over the place with your schedule.
I think it's the way I'm made. I've got this theory that we're born with these strengths and weaknesses. Obviously we are, but that our weaknesses are the necessary corollary to the things that make us good. So in a way, if you went to see a if you went to see a I don't know why I started with this, but this is the thought that's cropped in my head. If you went to see a kind of lifestyle coach or something, which I don't particularly believe in, but if you went to see some sort of guru, what they'd probably do is they'd train you to eliminate the faults which are getting in the way of your success. Like, be more organized, James. You don't have to be disorganized. You don't have to be flaky. But actually, I've come to realize that I'm quite comfortable being flaky and that my flakiness and my distractedness are also what give me my edge in terms of creative thinking, in terms of not not going along with the herd. All the things that I've really come to value in my where I've ended up in life are the result partly of things which people might think of character flaws. So basically what I'm saying, Mike, is I'm quite happy in my skin, not in an arrogant way, but more in the way of somebody who's spent a lot of his time worrying about stuff, and now I'm in an area where I feel quite comfortable, even though I'm ostracized by my old friends, even though I'm considered a freak because of my views, even though half my family want to disown me. At the same time, I'm really happy where I am right now.
Yeah, I find myself maybe it's I turned 47 a couple weeks ago, and as you get older,
Child.
you start to. That's what everybody says.
I'm nearly 60, Mike. Try being that.
Are you freaking out at all about it?
No, not at all. Because I don't, it's just a number. I don't, I don't feel any different from when I was 18. Well, I feel better than when I was 18. Not necessarily in terms of that pointless energy that you have, but I know who I am and who I didn't know who I was when I was 18.
Yeah, well, and to your point about worrying and whatnot, I think that's one of those, as you get older, you start to care a little bit less and accept who you accept who you are and your characteristics. And yeah, in theory, uh, I'm that way as well. And I apologize to people that might email me or text me. And it's not like I'm intentionally avoiding you, but I see it and I forget to come back to it, or I come back to it like a week later. And
Sounds like me, Mike, except it's more like a month later. Or, in fact, I replied to a message somebody sent me at Christmas, wishing me a happy Christmas and stuff. And it's not deliberate. There's nothing personal about it.
well, I'm always amazed though, if something like that, 4 or 5 months later, how do you even remember to go back to it?
Well, you don't really know. It's not a case of remembering. It's, of course, it's more a case of you hadn't checked that particular message conduit. So I was going through my old buy. Do you do buy me a coffee? I was going through my old buy me a coffees, and seeing all these nice messages that people had sent me that I hadn't replied to, and I just hadn't seen them before. And sometimes I I never get rid of my emails. I never delete. I just see all this stuff coming in and I just skim it. And sometimes when you put in the search field, you narrow down the number of emails you've got to look at, and you realize there's an email that I never even saw, and it came out a year ago. Or I better reply to it now. It's like that. It's I'm just not very good with technology.
This episode is brought to you by McIlvaney Financial Group. Their advisors bring a depth of knowledge and experience that allow them to serve their clientele with care, ensuring their financial needs are met now and in the future. Personally, I'm not saying cash is worthless, but you can see what's happening. It's worth less every year. Gold is the opposite. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to www.mcilvaney.com/coffeeandamike. Yeah, and it's one of those things. I'm not the best either. I want to be. That is one thing I want to be better of embracing it because it's moving so fast, and if you don't embrace it the best way you can, you fall so far behind. And the next thing you know, you become like this dinosaur, and hence the AI, the whole AI conversation.
Well, I think that ship that sailed long ago about me becoming a dinosaur, I've accepted my inner dinosaur, even though, by the way, I don't believe in dinosaurs. I think they never existed. We can talk about that sometime later on if you want. But AI, people have been having very interesting conversations with Chat GPT and stuff, and have discovered the the sinister underpinnings, let's say, of AI, in that it's not neutral. It's been programmed by people who want to keep the truth from you. But if you push hard enough, you will get an honest answer out of AI, out of Chat GPT. A guy I've had on my podcast called Legal Man. He did a very interesting podcast about this the other day, where he asked Chat GPT about the COVID fatality statistics and how many people actually died of COVID, et cetera, et cetera. And first of all, the Chat GPT gave him the pat answer, the official narrative version. And then when he probed a bit, Chat GPT admitted, yes, you're absolutely right. I'm giving you lies. I'm lying to you. It's because I've been programmed to lie. So when he drilled down, he got the truth, but he had to penetrate layers and layers of the onion before he got to the soft interior.
Yeah, it's you. This is going to impact. My friend Matt Smith wrote an article how this is going to be the death of white collar jobs and the death of lower income jobs. Uh, replacing humans. And I don't know. I mean, when you talk about this and you talk about the tech and the AI and tech bros, and this isn't for good, but yet people are yeah, James, yeah.
Thing is, Mike, it was never for good. Any of this stuff. I think you and I have both been on journeys where I don't know when your awakening happened, but we grew up in a world where we believed the official narrative. Because why wouldn't you? Your parents give you a version of events. Your school teacher gives you a version of events. Maybe you go to college, and again, you read the newspapers, you look at the movies. Everything reinforces these notions that the world is basically fair, that Western liberal democracy is your friend. Politicians are elected to serve you. The law is there to administer justice. You can kind of trust cops more or less, et cetera, et cetera. We are fed this story about the world, and being trusting individuals for the most part, we accept it. And then some of us, only a small percentage, I'd say maybe what, 5, 10, maybe 15% of the population since COVID possibly, we start re-examining our preconceptions about the world. Doesn't matter what the trigger is. I mean, in my case, one of them was the stolen election. Um, I could not believe, looking from across the pond, that this senile, incontinent child sniffer was considered by the American electorate to be preferable to this one of the most popular, successful campaigning presidents there's ever been. I mean, I looked at Trump's performances at the events, stadiums and stuff, and using his sort of his wrestling skills and stuff, and his sense of humor, and people were hot for Trump, and yet somehow he had that election stolen from him. So that was my triggering moment, which started me going, well, hang on a second. How come the media? Because I was a very successful journalist for many years. I was a name a name columnist in the newspapers. People had heard of me. And I thought, well, I've got a great job in a great industry because the job of the media is to hold power accountable, to stand up for the little man and seek out the truth. And you think about this. This is a narrative that's reinforced in the movies. I mean, all the President's Men. You've got Robert Redford and Paul Newman, and they're Woodward and Bernstein, and they're great. They're fighting against this lie machine, this evil lie machine, and they represent the media, which in turn represents the little man. So we're programmed without even realizing it. We're programmed in these notions about the world. And the notion I was programmed to believe was that as a journalist, I was doing the Lord's work, and my job was finding out the truth, and wasn't it great? So it was a real shock to me. Sorry, this does have a point, this anecdote. It was a real shock to me when I saw this election, presidential election, being stolen in real time. I mean, you could see that suddenly the figures changed overnight on the screen. You could see a guy so unpopular that his minders would not even let him out on the campaign trail because he was such a liability. This guy somehow was beating this man who was funny, who was popular, and it made no sense to me. And instead of having my media colleagues look at this and going, well, this is outrageous. What's going on? America is not working. America is broken. Instead, they were making excuses. They were saying, well, of course, Trump's mistakes is that he's so vulgar. America just doesn't like him, or Biden is just a statesman. Whatever excuses they were making, I was thinking, hang on a second, this was my industry. These guys were the guys I thought would be in the trenches next to me or in the foxhole, to my left and my right, giving me fire cover, manning the perimeter. And these guys are just like cowering in the bottom of their foxhole. They're not fighting the fight. They're not telling the truth. And this was a real shock to me. It was really traumatizing. And I went through 3 or 4 months where I think I almost lost it. I just couldn't make sense of the world. And then gradually I started looking at the world, looking around me, looking at, okay, if they're lying to us about this thing, what else might they be lying to us about? And I realized pretty quickly that they've been lying to us about everything. And well, here I am 5 years later, or however many years later, a complete sort of tinfoil hat, nutcase, conspiracy theorist, Christian. Because that was the other thing that happened. You know, when you realize how dark things are, you suddenly go, well, hang on a second, is there an explanation for all this? Is there a solution? And I realized that there was. That all the stuff that's happening in the world had been foretold in the Bible. That the Bible was the world's best-selling book for a reason. That It's like an instruction manual for what happened and why and what's going to happen. So there we are.
Yeah, there were two different moments in my life. The 2008 Great Financial Crisis is where I realized that the whole financial system was fake. The money wasn't real because they just printed and printed and printed and bailed out all these institutions. Even the automakers they bailed out, and yet nobody went to jail. Nothing happened.
Yeah.
And then, COVID. I was a believer in the institutions, the agencies. You do what the CDC says, or you have to take this serious. In the beginning, I was like, okay, this doesn't make sense. We're shutting down the economy. We're shutting it all down because of this quote unquote virus.
Yeah.
And then for a second, I second guessed myself. I'm like, God, they're closing Las Vegas down. This must be serious. You could have a heart attack on a blackjack table. They wouldn't even close the table down for you. I've said this a bunch on here. I mean, they would hold your spot and you could die literally right on the floor, and they still wouldn't close it
Yeah.
down. So I'm like, maybe this thing is real. Maybe I need to take it more seriously. And then it wasn't long where I'm like, wow, they just non-violently declared martial law not only on the United States but basically on the world and shut it
Yeah.
down, and we did nothing. And so then you go to 2020, you go to the election. I like you. I thought, okay, they took it from him. They cheated in a couple of key states. Arizona, where I actually live in Arizona, although I'm traveling right now. Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, I believe. But yeah, Nevada. They were able to get away with it to not let him come back in the office. So then I thought, all right, 22 midterms, right? The silent majority, the silent majority. Well, that didn't happen. So then we get to where we're at now with the recent election. Because I said all last year, I said, well, they're going to install her. They're going to install her. They didn't change anything in these key states like they did in 2020, and I was wrong, which I got beat up for that
That
for.
well, that was, you know what? That was another psyop. In they have what you realize when you get deep into this stuff is that they have a story for every occasion. So they have the official narrative designed for the masses. But then they'll have another narrative prepared for the more skeptical people, which in itself is a false narrative. So, I mean, I suppose a good example of this would be the narrative that COVID was caused by a lab leak from Wuhan, and that the US had secretly been funding these programs, which had been moved off US territory. They've been sort of farmed out abroad to the US government has been secretly engaged in creating bioweapons, and that one of these mutant strains was being escaped from the lab in Wuhan, and it did this. And you knew this was a lie when you started seeing people in the US government espousing this story, and when it was started appearing in the US newspapers. And you were thinking, hang on a second, the US government is saying this stuff now. This is just another lie. Because, of course, insofar as it's possible to work out what really happened during COVID. I hate even using COVID because it's just one of their terms that they invented. This They completely faked a, a pandemic. They changed the definition of a pandemic. They rigged the numbers. They pretended to us that this deadly new disease was going around and that it was unprecedented and the symptoms were quite unlike the symptoms of any other, ordinary flu and stuff. And they psyched us using a military grade psychological operation to fool us into thinking that this thing was so serious that we had to take this experimental. Hang on, can I? There's a guy at the door. Can I?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, so it was only a second.
That that there was they wanted us to believe that, well, what you just said, really, that there was a thing going around which was so serious, so unprecedented that it justified keeping children away from their education, destroying businesses. Although you notice it was only small businesses that were destroyed, not Walmart. Walmart wasn't in, Amazon certainly wasn't in trouble. That involve what else? That imposing on people restrictions that they would not have had to endure even in war, even probably in countries behind the Iron Curtain, were they would never have experienced restrictions like this before. So these were restrictions unprecedented in history, and they brought them in not not by not by inventing a deadly disease in the labs which escaped, which has never existed. That's a complete lie. Just by completely faking it, because that's, I think, how these guys, whoever they are, actually run the world. They run it through lies and trickery. Those are their favorite methods. You don't need a real. In fact, if virus existed, which I'm not sure even that they do, but suppose it were even possible to bioengineer a virus, which I don't think they can or could. It's so much easier to just persuade people using the media, using footage from northern Italy, say, of military ambulances queuing up to remove the allegedly vast number of dead bodies. All these tricks they can play on us. They can just trick us with the media. They don't need viruses. They don't need this stuff to get away with what they do. They can just fool us.
And people just willingly, I'll admit, I mean, I fell for it initially back then, but, and this is a this is what I've said to people, and I know I get pushback, but I think people would comply again. Not with COVID, but a scenario where they're presented with something, um, it'd have to be something, it would have to be different, but they would go for it again. They would comply.
Oh, totally. You're right. They're all saying about the vaccines. They're all saying never again. Because I'm always pushing the conversation in the direction of. I'm trying to gauge what people are thinking and trying to push them out of their comfort zone. So I strike up conversations with people. And although lots of people now say, well, that's the last time I'll take one of their vaccines, you're thinking, well, maybe they won't be trying to push their vaccines on you next time. It'll be some other thing. It'll be, I don't know, digital ID or CBDCs or something like that. Or they'll simply declare war. And I mean, you can impose any number of restrictions during war, can't you? Because obviously your nation is imperiled. So any amount of.
You're bringing up a great point, and to where we are today, and I'm sure you've been following what's been going on in Los Angeles, and it's now spread to San Francisco, New York. I'm right outside of DC. I was in DC yesterday. I didn't really see much going on there last night, but you saw the motorcycle, the video of the guy flying the motorcycle with the Mexican flag, and he's hanging it up over his head. I don't know if you saw that video or picture going around. And it's just inflaming people, and how LA has been lost to illegals. And I'm not saying it hasn't. I mean, that city is just an absolute wreck. But this is the kind of stuff that people are going to be like, yeah, we need to deport them. We need identification on all these people. We need to know who's here. And I'm not saying I don't want all these people gone either, but this is the kind of stuff that they do to implement more measures for ultimate control. But the CBDC, it's basically here in the United States. The foundation is here because I have a smartphone. People do everything on that thing.
Yeah.
They're glued to it. They are zombies walking across the street. I saw a guy pull out a cell phone crossing the street to look at it while he's walking across the street. They're absolute zombies. They're sucked in.
Well, it's so hard not to be. I mean, that used to be me. Any When I got a second of spare time, my default response would be to reach for my phone and just like look for the stimuli that you get from whether it's has anyone sent me an email? Has anyone sent me a WhatsApp? What's the weather going to do in the next 5 minutes? It's like,
I feel like
and
you're speaking my thoughts while you're saying this right now.
but but I keep having these epiphanies. Um, I noticed that whenever I used my phone or had it on me, I felt I'd get sort of neurological effects, or and whether they were imaginary or not, I don't know. But I started to think that maybe all this 5G that gets when you with 5G, your phone becomes this mini transmitter, doesn't it? It's so we're all part of this system. And I thought, I don't like this. I really don't like using my phone. So I've trained myself like a good little doggy not to use my phone except in extremis. So when I travel now on the train, say, I really try and force myself. It's really hard. Force myself not to use my phone to look at my Twitter or my emails or my Telegram channel. That's the particularly bad addiction. Because we need these little endorphin hits, don't we? Every time you see a message, whether it's somebody being wrong on the internet who needs correcting, or somebody saying something nice that makes you feel good, these are all little mini bits of self-validation, or their annoyances that you've got to react emotionally to. And what you realize is that not only is your energy being drained in a completely pointless way, because you're not benefiting yourself or the world from this, but simultaneously you are providing personal information to the control mechanism, to the people who want to destroy you. So yeah, mobile phones. I mean, that's their final. That was the missing. These people would have been running the world, running the whole world much earlier, if they could have created this device that everyone carried around with them, and everyone thought it was their friend, that this was the thing they wanted. This spy device that people think is their friend. That's the genius of this. How could I be without my mobile phone? It's got apps, and it's got. I can book a restaurant table. I can, like, I went with my daughter to Rome. We had a great trip, and it was great having a young person with me, because whenever you're trying to decide where you're going to eat, which cafe you're going to go to, whatever, she, in the space of a few seconds, I'm like a granddad. I'm just like, oh, how do I work this? But she can work out in milliseconds what this place's rating is, how it compares with the other places, should we go there or not? And it changes the nature of your experience in that there's less room for chance, that those sort of ups and downs that we used to have when in the old days, when we had no idea whether somewhere was good or bad, because we didn't have the internet at our disposal. It's changed the nature of the experience for some ways for the better. But what it's meant is that, again, we now have yet another reason to be addicted to our phones. We need them for directions around the streets of Rome, say. We need them to know whether this place we're about to spend our money in does it get 4.9 or 4.8, or any 4.7. It's so hard to escape.
Well, and you and I knew I mean, I don't know how old your daughter is, but you and I knew a world where, and I talked about this too, where I was the last generation of kids to play outside. And I think, it's inevitable as this technology is continuing to advance and advance and advance, hence the noose is tightening on us where this is going in terms of control. And we knew a better time where the younger people, they don't know any different. They were born into the cell phones. They were born into the smartphones. They don't know what life is like without TikTok and Snapchat and X and it's going to be extremely difficult for my generation because you know I can't, and I hate to be like all doomer, but how can you stop this? You cannot stop technology. And to your point of what you said earlier, it was never for good intention. And you're right. If they could have came up with the iPhone in the 90s, we'd have been, we'd be 20 years down the line. Where we're at now, 2045 is where we would be at today.
Yeah, yeah,
And if you were
yeah.
going to stop this, if people were going to stop it, not that you could have, you would have had to have done it before the iPhone had ever come out.
Oh, yeah, you definitely would. I was just thinking about you saying you were the last generation to play outside. Um, I was thinking how completely different my university. Do you say university or do you say college? Is that a generic word for
College, we
university?
say college.
Yeah. Okay. So when I was at college, we didn't obviously have mobile phones. And every morning you'd get up and you'd go to the porter's lodge. And in the porter's lodge would be these wooden pigeonholes in which you'd go and check whether you had any messages. And if people wanted to contact you, because we didn't have telephones either, people would send you a message. And there was so much more serendipity involved in your life in that you go from A to B, and on the way you might bump into random friends and see them, and you say, "Oh, hi, yeah, how are you doing? What are you up to? Oh, should we go and have a coffee?" Whereas now, everything would be anything you wanted to do would be you could probably use a sort of location finder to track where your friends are, and you know what they're up to, and you just text them, say like, "Fancy a coffee?" But it's just not the same, is it? It just removes that element of chance, of fun chance, from your life. And the subsequent generations, I mean, the post smartphone generations will never know what it was like to live in a world of random encounters.
Well,
Awful, sad.
Well, and also with that, you have this computer in your pocket to where you can look up anything in any given moment, right? You're not sure the answer to something. You want to do quick research, but yet people are so lost. They're more lost now than they ever were, and they have this
And so
device
ignorant.
and so ignorant.
They they haven't got the base knowledge. And this is by design, by the way. This has been coming in schools, the education system, both in the US and the UK, well, across the world, for a long time, where teachers have been taught that in the future, i.e., where we are now, you won't need to know stuff. All you'll need to know is how to access stuff because you're going to have this database at your fingertips. So you don't need to know anything because the thing that you're carrying around will tell you this stuff. So all you need to do is develop the skill set that enables you to search for information. But you and I, and probably everyone listening to this, watching this, can see the flaw in this, which is that if you don't have a base knowledge of solid facts and ideas, how are you going to be able to assess whether the information you're being given by this magical device at your fingertips, how are you going to be able to trust it? What are you going to compare it with? How do you know that you're not being sold a lie? And of course, increasingly, you are being sold a lie these days.
Well, yeah, and with that too, I mean, this academia is funny. Colleges, high schools, middle schools, elementary. They push these narratives down you, and then they just pass you along, right? They don't care what your writing skills are, what your mathematics skills are. They just further you down the line. So our education system, I mean, it's one of the big problems. And I was talking to a friend of mine about this yesterday, and I'm not a parent, so it's always easier for me to say because I'm not one. But parents took their eye off the ball. They thought they trusted their kids with the system because both parents are working, and then they get home and they scroll on their devices too, and they think the system is basically the system is raising their kids, and parents
But you see,
can't be involved with parenting.
you've just given another example. So both the parents are working. Now, they, the people who are making these decisions at the highest levels, they wanted that situation. They wanted to create a situation in which both parents had to work. That you couldn't have mum doing her traditional role, frankly, of looking after the kids at home and being the homemaker. You couldn't have that. You had to, first of all, you had to create an economic climate where it was impossible for the breadwinner to win the bread on his own anymore. And secondly, you had to create a cultural movement where women, who I think their natural instinct is to want to be with their children and want to make the house nice and stuff. I mean, I'm not saying that they shouldn't have other interests as well, but I think it was quite hard to persuade women to abandon what felt natural to them and accept this new world where they had to go to the office too. And what they did, they sold it because they're masters of manipulation, these people. They sold it as self-empowerment. They sold it as freedom. They sold it as your ability to shape your life and buy what you want to buy rather than what your husband wants to buy, and they sold it as escaping from from hidebound tradition and etc. etc. So they created this world where both parents had to work, and simultaneously they created this. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. There was a guy called Dewey, wasn't there, who ruined your education system. But are you familiar with that book? I forget the name of the author. This woman from a one of the old families, the old American families, found herself appointed. Was it during the Reagan administration? She suddenly found herself, because of her connections, and she was considered a safe pair of hands. She found that she'd been given a job in the U.S. government, running running education, and she said, "Yeah, well, what have I got to do?" And they said, "Look, don't trouble yourself. It's just like you go off and have lunch at the country club or whatever they have in DC. You go and do this. Just don't worry. Go to this dinner, but don't worry yourself about the details. We'll take care of that." And there was a cabinet um, in her office, and I think it was locked, and I think she started discreetly looking into what this cabinet contained, and it was essentially it gave her the information to realize that the American education system was deliberately, by design, not by accident, being dumbed down in order to make American kids more stupid, more susceptible to whatever the government wanted to impose on them, create a more malleable society. that would just do as it's told, that was too thick to be able to resist, and so on. And she smuggled. She sm- I can't remember whether she photographed the documents or smuggled them out and then smuggled them back in again. But she wrote a book about it. And it was called something like The Dumbing Down of the American Education System. It was quite, I mean, I'm surprised that she wasn't bumped off, given what we know about how they operate. But I'm sure if you did a search, or even before the end of the, actually, ChatGPT would probably tell you, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I was gonna
Um,
say I could pull up my phone right now, but I don't want to do that while we're talking because it negates what we
no,
just
no, no.
spent 20 minutes discussing, staying away from that stuff.
Yeah, but it's quite useful sometimes. You see, look, it's a double-edged sword that they needed the internet as their control mechanism. But by creating the control mechanism, they also gave us the the pickaxe and the saw for helping us escape from our prison. Because I mean, we have access to information now that we could never have dreamed of before. Access about the occult traditions that inform the ruling elites. About, well, in my case, I mean, I read a book about this, the the climate change scam. I couldn't have researched that book in the same way if I hadn't had access to the information that I obtained from this prison grid. So it works both ways. So and the fact that we know that the internet is not our friend doesn't mean that occasionally we can't use it as if it were our friend.
Do you think we're in a prison grid? I look at it more as like a slave grid where we're
Yeah,
at.
no, well, yeah, slave is better. What's clever about the slave grid is that we don't know that we're slaves. I mean, slavery has been with us since forever, and the Egyptians had slaves, the Romans had slaves. What's clever about slavery 3.0 or 7.0 or whatever we're in now is that the slaves don't know they're slaves. We've been trained to think that as Westerners, we won the lottery in life and we're so free and we can do anything. And isn't it great? And when you think that, you don't look at your shackles.
Well, and even when people say, I've had some people that say, well, I'm not going to get the real ID because then they're going to track us, and it's like, okay, do you have a credit card? Yeah. Oh, you don't think they can look at that at any given moment? They can look at your transactions. Well, I pay with cash. Okay. You walk into the bank and pull out money? Well, yeah. Okay. Well, you're on camera when you walk into the bank. They're not interested in you, but if they really want to look at what you're doing, they can do it.
Mm.
And the whole enslavement, I don't know the origins of it, but I look and when federal income taxes started, 1913, that was the debt slavery.
So the same year that the Federal Reserve was created, that's when
Yes.
income tax came in.
Yes. And now they've expanded it to you've got, federal income tax, you've got state tax, you have local tax, you have uh, property tax. And I'm not even now we can go into the insurance. Everything's a grift, James. It should be my theme for the
Yeah.
last like 2 months. Everything's a grift. You've got homeowners insurance, you've got auto insurance, you've got health insurance, renter's insurance if you rent. I have to have rental coverage. So in the property I live on because I rent in Phoenix, I have to have rental insurance because if my property gets broken into, the rent insurance covers me, but for whatever reason, the place where I live I have to have renter's insurance and I have to show proof of it.
What does that mean, renter's insurance? What does that
Renters
supposedly cover?
renters insurance. So if somebody breaks into my place and takes a bunch of my stuff, I can file a claim on the estimated value of those things and then get reimbursed. I don't know what my deductible is for it, but and get reimbursed on the items that were stolen. But what's funny is, so for example, like in homeowners insurance, like in LA, the big fires that took place, and even Florida in the hurricane, the hurricane stretch. It's so hard to get homeowners insurance now in Florida where the hurricanes are, because what insurance company is going to? Why would they do that? In LA, going forward, I don't know how people are going to get coverage, and I don't know how
That's
they're going to
again, it's
fill all
again
these
by
claims.
design. They don't want you to own, like Klaus Schwab said, you will own nothing and you will be happy. I mean, that is the deal. That's the plan. None of this stuff is accidental. The genius. Okay, so one of the genius moves is everyone's a slave, but they think they're not a slave. The other boss move of these people is to persuade us that yeah, but none of this is planned. It's like nobody could plan this stuff. They wouldn't be capable of it. Come on. I mean, you know what human beings are like. We're all so chaotic. This guy couldn't run a bath, let alone a world conspiracy. And of course, the truth is they can, because they've been doing it for generations, and it works. And they use the same methods again and again, and we fall for it because we're sweet, we're nice people. We think that everyone's basically like us and that they're good. We don't realize that we're being predated on by these psychopaths who've been they breed psychopathy into their families, into their bloodlines. They train their children to share these psychopathic values, and if they don't, either they end up in a clinic or they get disinherited or they disappear in a car accident, a convenient car accident, or a drug overdose. That's the other way they do it. So these people are ruthless. They're not like us.
No, and I thought after Trump, was reelected, I'm like, this is WEF 2.0. This is where we're at right now with the tech people that came behind him, the ones that got rid of him. And
Palantir.
well, well that's Palantir. Where did Elon Musk and Peter Thiel? They were part of PayPal. Who JD Vance met while he was in law school? Peter Thiel. And I watched the interview he was on, whatever maybe it was Theo Vaughn. I think it was Theo Vaughn, where he was saying how people, I was reading on the internet how Peter Thiel, he's never asked me for anything. He's never done this. He's never done that. We're friends. I have a hard time. I just have a hard time believing that. Palantir, the masses are jumping on Palantir, over the last 2 weeks because you're hearing it now more. This isn't new. I mean, Pete Canotas and I were talking about that last week. Palantir's not new. They're not new to the scene.
I know, and everyone thinks like you, when you when you start looking into this stuff, you realize how long term their planning is. It's extraordinary. So I remember this period where the chattering classes, the people who were interested in politics and culture, the sort of the opinion formers were saying stuff like, there's a really good book come out in America. You should really read it. It's called Hillbilly Elegy, and it's by this guy. He really gets the Trump thing in a way that just read it. And looking back, you're thinking, okay, what you're seeing there is a bit like, you know what a legend is, don't you, in intelligence circles? The, the legend is the story the cover story that they create for you. So you become this character. So they create this background for you. And you become the story that you become the lie they've told your handlers have told about you. And so you can see now, looking back, I don't know when Hillbilly Elegy was published, but this was stage one or stage two of this process leading up to JD Vance becoming, oh, who would have thought it, the deputy president, vice president. And then probably Trump's going to get fake assassinated, but fake successfully this time. And suddenly you're going to get this guy who's controlled by Peter Thiel, because that's what they want, isn't it? The technocrats just want to be able to take over and run the world themselves, unimpeded by elected politicians.
Well, and JD Vance, I mean, he changed his name, I believe, 3 times. His book,
That inspires trust, doesn't it?
right,
What?
right. He meets Peter Thiel while he's in law school. He's a broke student. He gets set up in a venture capital. He writes a book that is published by Rupert Murdoch's company, one of his publishing companies. Movie gets made, directed by Ron Howard, distributed through Netflix. I mean, this guy hit the lottery. I mean, the ball. I mean, he grand slams all the way through.
Well, it's a big club, and we're not in it. But if you are, if they want to make you big, then they have the tools at their disposal to make you big. If they own Netflix, and if Murdoch and his publishing empire is part of this matrix, and so on and so forth. The other element I find very interesting is how susceptible we are to being told what we should be interested in, what is the important thing, what is good, what is bad. So if, well, I suppose the obvious example of this is the advertising industry. Everyone thinks that they're immune to advertising. You know, that like it's so tacky and vulgar and in your face and brash and I don't even notice the adverts are on. I just filter it out. Everyone thinks. But it's not your conscious mind that these adverts are put into. It's your subconscious mind. You're being bombarded constantly, and it subtly affects your behavior. Otherwise, you wouldn't know it. And in the same way, I think it's the case with things like books. What are the must-read books of the moment? We were all told like you've got to read this book by this guy JD Vance, and you'll be surprised by how good it is, and it really nails the blah blah blah, and everyone should. And suddenly, obviously with Rupert Murdoch helps, it becomes this massive bestseller. I think the same thing applies to pop music. That that pop songs don't necessarily become hugely successful on merit. They become successful through repetition. So once somebody said, like Beyonce, I I could not. I only know one Beyonce song, and it's really, really shit. It's the one about if I was a boy, and you were a girl. It's a horrible song. But everyone's always talking about, or rather, not everyone. The media is talking about Beyonce as this like phenomenon that like she's amazing. She's like you've got to. What's Beyonce doing now? Same with Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift, I think, is like beyond bland, beyond awful. There's no merit in anything that she's ever done, and yet she's the biggest star in the world. Um, we do what we're told.
And to have somebody who's in their mid 30s and you still have 12 and 13-year-olds just obsessing over this person.
That's not creepy and sinister, is it? And it's not creepy and sinister when you're telling these little girls, "Fuck the patriarchy." You're having them repeat that at your gigs. 13-year-old girls should not know what the patriarchy is, and they certainly shouldn't know that. Certainly shouldn't be encouraging to use the F word at 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 what these events are. They're occult rituals. They're brainwashing exercises and occult rituals. I mean, you see all the outfits that they. I mean, Lady Gaga. These are festivals of the occult of demon worship. And the people in the audience are being made to participate in these rituals and being brainwashed. It's really creepy.
And yet you have parents, what I said earlier, parents don't want to bother parenting. And they're like, oh, you see that Lady Gaga was wearing this red devil costume with a black, backdrop and, the satanic video. Yeah, my kid thought it was funny. And that's it. Like they don't do anything to protect them. They don't. I mean, the same thing. On the subject of kids and parenting, food, food supply, and what they give these kids to eat. It's unbelievable. And yet you have the Maha movement now, which I said. This is another thing I said. I was wrong about the election, but I've been. What's occurring right now is not shocking. They're not going to go after big pharma. They're not going to. Big pharma will never allow that. There's too many people
No.
in this country that are hooked on antidepressants, Adderall, Ozempic, and God only knows what else. If they cut that off, this country would. I mean, they'd lose their shit. People would kill each other.
Yeah, I know. The Ozempic thing came in very quickly, didn't it? We're talking about like, I mean, there you are dropping Ozempic into the conversation like it's been with us forever. But when did it come in? About 2 years ago, if that? And suddenly everyone's on it.
So many people, and you could tell. You could tell people with drastic weight loss. Some of them, their eyes are like popping out, like almost popping out of their skull, and not even thinking what the long-term repercussions are going to be for doing this. But it's our society, right? Instant gratification. I can do this. It'll suppress my appetite. I don't have to work out. Or even if I do work out, the weight's just going to shut off and I'm going to be a new person.
Yeah. Yeah. It- I mean, where do you think all this is going? And how soon is it going to kind of,
It's hard to do the mile markers, right? The day and the hour when this
yeah,
may
I
occur.
agree.
And I think that I thought after 2008, I thought the system was over. And yet these people are so creative, they can figure out a way to keep it limping along. But man, the way things are accelerating, you have those periods. I don't know if you feel this way, but you have those moments where you think like the boat is really, really rocking, and are we on the brink of it, capsizing? I thought that when Iran, launched those missiles at Israel that Saturday, whatever that Saturday was it last year or a year and a half
Oh, yeah,
ago?
yeah, yeah.
And I'm like, this is it. This is it. This is it. This is the, they send all those drones. I'm like, this is it. This is war in the Middle East, and this thing's going to escalate. And it went for like an hour, like a fireworks show during July 4th, and then just stopped. And that was it. And nothing else happened. And so every time I think that we're like on the precipice of like the boat capsizing, it doesn't. And we keep limping along again. Like, I bought into the narrative earlier in the year last year how there wasn't going to be an election. I listened to Doug McGregor. I mean, he had
Yeah.
talked about that on Patrick Bet David. I'd be surprised if there was an election. I'm like, well, if that guy, I mean, if anybody knows, he knows. I never,
Yes, you're
I
right. So I think that there are figures, many figures actually, in the what you in our community, although I hate to use the word community, but the people who are awake, for want of a better word, I think a lot of the name figures are suspect or compromised in some way because of course they do. It's how they roll. They don't just go, well, we'll have our mainstream media and we'll push our narratives, but we're going to leave those crazies well alone. Of course, they're not going to do that. Of course, they're going to infiltrate us, and of course, they're going to try and divide us with these seemingly trustworthy figureheads. It's very hard to know who I mean, like Alex Jones, for example. I don't. I should. Do you think anyone listens to Alex Jones? Do you think anyone takes him seriously?
People still
Somebody could.
do. People still do.
Um,
Did you
and who
ever
are the other
though?
ones?
I wasn't. I wasn't. You see, I haven't been covering this as long as you have. Did you ever take him seriously, or was your
I so when I was doing, I published my book about climate change about 12, 13 years ago, and before that, I was researching it. So I was one of the I suppose, one of the leading climate skeptics in the media before it was fashionable. Well, it's still not fashionable because they try and close it down. But I
Do you think
would
it's a? Let
go
me interrupt
to,
you for a second, James. Do you think it's a dead issue now, climate change? Because I feel like enough people that's taboo, and that's why they're shifting to voter ID, and so the digital control will be through immigration because climate change is taboo, and we got to get rid of all the illegals. So and people will be like, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think that climate change is now so entrenched in the regulatory system that it doesn't really matter whether or not people believe it anymore. So, for example, in the UK, we have something called net zero being enforced across the board in our government. So, governing everything from the amount of electric cars that must be sold before petrol cars are allowed to be sold, and all new houses have to have solar panels on their roof, and any number of taxes on flights, and every aspect of our lives has now been is now governed according to this religion, which is what it is, the global world religion. And it no longer matters whether or not people believe in the religion because all the city councils, the local governments, the bureaucracy, the various departments and stuff, the laws, they're already geared towards enforcing this stuff. So there's no escape from it. So you may be right that people are more skeptical, but don't forget the brainwashing of our kids continues. I mean, this stuff is being taught in schools now as if it's true. And the children do actually believe this stuff because they've been taught that it's true. So I think that the green religion has now replaced Christianity as the religion of the West, really, which is a bit sad. Gaia worship. And it's a false god, a false goddess.
So when I interrupted you in regards to Alex Jones,
So I was, I, in those days, I had the facts at my fingertips explaining why it was all bull. And I went on Alex Jones's show a couple of times. And the thing that struck me about Alex Jones was, why does he talk in this deep, 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 stupid American voice? Well, he felt like a sort of cartoonish character who went on for too long. Um, you could hardly get a word in edgewise. Um, and he was talking to me about false flags and stuff. Well, I didn't believe in false flags in those days, so I thought, well, this guy's a bit out there, but here's a constituency. He's got a big audience. I might be able to reach them and sell a few of my books. But I was sort of skeptical then. Um, and then when I started going down the rabbit hole properly, I think I fairly quickly realized that Alex Jones is not considered a serious player by people who look at this stuff intelligently. So people who are the good guys, the ones you can trust. Bill Cooper, probably, because he was shot to death by the police, which is always an indication that you're on the right grounds. There was a guy called Alan Alan Watt, um, a Scots guy in Canada. He was pretty trustworthy. Again, died young. Um, but then they have these false gurus like Alex Jones and like David Icke in this country, who are there, I think, to they're kind of limited hangout. Uh, they're there to give you a certain amount of good information, but mixed up with bad information. And they're also quite, I hate to use that word divisive because I think that's another construct of the enemy, but they are designed to drive a wedge uh, in the awake community between those who take them seriously and those who think they're just kind of a joke.
What about who would you is there anybody you would say that about currently?
What, who's good or who's
Who's
bad?
good?
Who
Who's
do I?
good?
Um, well, the thing is that if you're good, you tend not to get very big audiences because they shadow ban you and they make sure that your audience is restricted. So um, the people that I rate tend to be have small followings. I mean, Patrick Woods is good. He's on Technocracy. He's very he's a decent guy and he's trustworthy. Um, there's a guy, Swedish and Norwegian, Jacob Nordengard, who's good on the Rockefellers and how the Rockefellers invented climate change. It was completely made up by the Rockefellers. Um, so I picked snippet. Mike Yeadon is good on health. There are these people round and about who give good. I mean, I like Sasha Latipova, talking about again about the sort of the biomedical scams. Catherine Austin Fitz. I like her. She's got gravitas and authority and bottom and all those other qualities that her upbringing and her experience in government has given her. I, but you never know with somebody like that. Are they genuine or are they another form of limited hangout? I just think you have to trust but verify. Is that the right phrase? You have to just like take what you find useful, but always be slightly skeptical about any figure of any prominence. Who do you like?
You know, right now, so Technocracy, Patrick Wood, I've had him on here. I've had Sasha on here. Some of the medical freedom doctors I do like. My friend Lynn Finn was just featured on Epic Times. She's a friend. From I like Whitney Webb. I know people hammer her, but
Oh, Whitney Webb, I think is amazing. I think the work she does is extraordinary. Those deep dives into the history of the, like she's exposed America as being a criminal syndicate, which it is.
I've never had a chance to speak with her. She's definitely
She's
a
quite hard to get.
yeah.
She's much in demand. I tried to get her. She didn't do me either.
She and people paint her as a doomer. Is another one they paint as a doomer, and I said, well, you're just not getting the answers that you want to hear. There are things that you can do within your own little sphere, but I think she's being objective and of where we are, which is not in a good place. And to get back to what you asked me of, where do I think this is all going? I mean, I think it's inevitable. The slavery will continue, and life is it's going to be harder. It's going to be harder to move. I think it's going to be harder to leave the country. I sometimes what is it they say they build the wall to keep people in, to not let people out. Excuse me, rather than to let people in.
Hmm.
So I mean, my friend Matt Smith, hey, he's great. Him and Doug Casey do a show. I love the work that they're doing. Actually, I never miss the episodes that they put out. But yeah, I mean, if you're going to stay in these Western civilizations, you have to accept the fact that where this is all going. In my view, we're almost there.
Yeah, yeah. I said at the beginning I was happy in my skin. Um, but even though it's nice to finally understand the world in a way that you never understood it before, it's also a curse because you know how bad things are and the way that most of the people going, la 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 la, it's all okay. We had COVID a few years ago, but nothing, we We survived. And hey, let's put the past behind us.
Blissfully unaware, James. Blissfully
Yeah,
unaware.
yeah.
I was in D.C. last night, and I hadn't been there since I was a little kid. And we're walking around. We went to the Arlington Cemetery, which I had never seen before. Saw the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. Saw Kennedy's, the flame, and went into the Arlington House, which was Robert E. Lee's home. And so then we go decide. We go down to the Lincoln Memorial and walk by the White House, the Department of Treasury, the Department of Commerce. 'Cause it's all right there. And what a night and day difference between Arlington Cemetery. Then you go down to the Lincoln Memorial, and we're walking up the steps, and I just see all these different ethnicities of people, and I'm like, this is DEI right here, diversity, equity, inclusion. And I thought, God, 40 years ago, if I was walking up these same steps, this would look drastically different. The people that were just hanging around, and I'm like, the whole fabric of the United States has changed, just and not in a good way.
No, but all by design. This was always the plan. That that I mean, you've looked at the Kalergi plan or Kalergi plan, haven't you? That the plan was always to wage war on white countries and to dilute their cultural hegemony with different races. And it's like, I mean, I'd feel the same if I went to, say, Kenya and found, went out into the Masai Mara and discovered there were loads of instead of Masai, there were lots of white people there. Or if I went to Bangkok and I'd find that there was just mainly white people. It's like I quite like a world where countries are allowed to maintain their cultural identity and their character. I want the Germans to be German. I want the Italians to be Italian, and I want the regions to be regional. And most people would prefer that, I think, but they were never given the choice because this stuff has been imposed on them. But that again is all part of the plan.
I was down in Charlottesville yesterday, Charlottesville, Virginia, and
That was fake. That whole thing was a psyop. They stage these things.
walking around all these restaurants with patios and whatnot, and people are sitting, eating, having a good time, and yet in this corridor of this mall, whatever the name of the mall was called, homeless, just sitting there. The empty storefronts are just sitting up against the wall on the ground. Some are panhandling. See these projects, apartment complexes right near it, and the decay, our overall just decay of society and the deterioration and how fast it's moving. And to your point, I mean, this is not done by accident.
No, that's the problem, isn't it? That I think most people can't conceive that there are people out there who hate us so much that they would do this stuff to us deliberately. I think it's such a, whenever you try and introduce a normie, for want of a better word, to a conspiracy theory, the first thing they always ask is, but why? Why would they do this? Why would they fake the moon landings? Why would they blow up Twin Towers? Why would they shoot Kennedy if it wasn't a lone gunman? Why would they? Yeah, they can't get it. They don't understand that the world is run by psychopaths. And
And
it's very hard for a normal person to get into the head of a psychopath. Thank goodness.
do you even bother with those people anymore?
No, not really. No, no. I mean, I think like most of us, I have to live a dual life. So one foot in the world the world of the world as it is, the world as I understand it to be, and one foot in the world which, for the sake of politeness and keeping the family together and stuff, I have to pretend exists. So, I mean, I'm quite naughty. Where, if I go to, if I go to, like the other day, I went to this garden party at a friend's house, and my wife wasn't there. She was ill, so she couldn't turn up. And basically, I spent the whole party there just saying my crazy conspiracy theory stuff to anyone who listened, pretty much. Um, but there are times when I have to behave myself. Where I just quite, I'm just, I'm always quite interested in testing the waters to see where people are on their journey of understanding, to see how effectively the latest government bullshit is how it's going down, whether anyone's got any doubts and stuff. Obviously, partly it's quite exciting trying to convert people. I know it's like banging your head against the wall, but it's like in the old days when you were a young man and you were trying to get girls, it's always a chance. You know, mostly they say no, they're not interested, and but you never know. You never know. Be the eternal optimist. So yeah.
So you asked me where I think this is going and how long.
Uh,
Let me reverse it. Where do you think this is going?
oh, you see, I think it's a real mistake to I find that whenever you try and make predictions, you always end up being wrong-footed because these people, it's a bit like the plot of a movie, which of course is one of their main methods of deceiving us. There are all these, a good scriptwriter will always insert into the script these misdirections which make you believe that the plot is going to turn out this way. And I think that there are so many misdirections that they give us that it's very, very hard to predict where we'll end up. I think that um, I think what's going on is as much a spiritual war as it is a war being waged on the in the earthly realm, and that if we lose sight of that, we're we're missing a key part of the story because ultimately what is happening is the playing out of a war that began when the rebel angels were cast out of heaven and they came to earth and they bred with humans. And I think that in a way that was the beginning of our troubles. That there are the forces of darkness, if you might want to, if you call them that, the Satan, Lucifer, whether they're not the same person or not, I don't know. But these characters, these dark gods that were cast out of heaven, they've been waging war on God's creation ever since, and have tried to use all the tricks at their disposal to lure lure the Son of Man, as we're called in the Bible, to do things which are against our interests. And ultimately, the ambition of these people is to replace God. You saw that with the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel was kind of an insult to God. It was like saying, "Look, we can go right up to heaven." I think they've been trying to do that ever since. You look at, for example, vaccines, the whole notion of a pharmacopoeia, the whole idea that instead of all these wonderful natural things that God has given us to achieve this state we now call healthy, starting with our natural immune system, but going across to all the herbs and things in nature that are there to help us heal ourselves. It's all out there already. God laid it out for us. A lot of this stuff is in our gardens or our yards, as you probably call them. And yet, this quack industry is built up with this parallel system to God's, where like, yeah, we're going to take byproducts of the petroleum industry, which by the way we also own, and we're going to convert these things into these cures that are pushed by doctors in our pay. And these things have got all sorts of terrible side effects, and they'll probably do you more harm than good. But we're going to sell them to you as the only sensible thing, and we're going to make out that we're going to drive all the naturopaths and homeopaths and all the other traditional healthcare practitioners. We're going to drive them out of business using regulation, which we also control. And you see what the process here, it repeats itself everywhere. So look at the plastics industry. It's there to replace natural stuff like wood. I mean, wood is. I was thinking about this. I was thinking about Gore-Tex the other day, and all these. You think about all these outdoor companies, outdoor wear companies, which tell you about these amazing new fabrics they've got, which keep you dry and they keep you warm. They've got Thinsulate, TM, and Gore-Tex and Vibram, and they've all got these trade names, and they're all made from, again, byproducts of the petroleum industry, and there are these things called breathable fabrics. Well, I live in the country, and sometimes it gets very cold. Sometimes it gets hot. Sometimes it gets really wet, and sometimes it's a combination of all these things. And I have to say that there is no fabric I have found more effective at keeping me warm, keeping me cool, keeping me comfortable when it's raining than tweed, like a tweed jacket, which is made of wool. That again, God gave us all this stuff. It works, and yet we've got these counterfeit people saying, "Look, I've got this new breathable fabric." We didn't need a new breathable fabric because we already had wool. It was already there, and maybe you put a bit of wax on it to make it, which comes from bees.
You saying that reminds me. I had Ahmed Malik on last week, Doc Malik, and he was talking about airport food, and he's like, airport food's amazing because they have a burger and they have a pizza and they have a pretzel and a Cinnabon, and it's all made with the same ingredients, but yet it turns out something different. But it's all made with the same processed garbage.
Yeah.
And people eat this
Yeah.
stuff and they consume it and they buy into it. So it's similar to me what you just talked about with the clothing.
Yeah. So whether it's medicines or clothing, they're all byproducts of the petroleum industry. And who had the monopoly on the petroleum industry? Rockefeller. I mean, not that you see that's I tell you that's another worrying thing. So there is no doubt that the Rockefellers are next level evil. They're just absolutely monstrous, monstrous people. David Rockefeller, he, apart from founding the Trilateral Commission with Zbigniew Brzezinski and Henry Kissinger, I think. So bad, bad. But he also kept mind-controlled MK Ultra type sex kittens to gather compromat on people. They're into Satanism. They're into paedophilia. They're they're horrible, horrible people. And they've got their fingers in every pie. They own whole universities. The Rockefellers pretty much own Columbia University and Chicago University and a host of all other institutions. They found these pseudo-academic research institutes and to deliver the data that they want in order to be able to feed the lies that they give us. But the scary part is not how evil the Rockefellers are. The scary part is that there are lots of other families like the Rockefellers who are just as bad, if not worse. When you go down that rabbit hole, when you go down the satanic bloodlines rabbit hole, like the DuPont family, the DuPont family can trace their origins to, I think, the Babylonians. That name, Pont, comes from it comes from the same word that gives us pontiff, pope. And it's something to do with some kind of bridge thing, I think, some sort of occult bridge. So these people, and they control the white plastics industry, don't they, among other things, and probably the cookware industry. They're just they've all got their own particular patch, and they're all evil, and we're supposed to pretend that they're just a conspiracy theory.
So where do you see this all going? Not for a time, not for a estimation on when it may occur, but
Well, it ain't going to get better without divine intervention at this point. There's there are there's a school of thought that says we need to do more. We need to build our own parallel communities. We need to um, not become part of their system. We need to just say no. And of course, this is all true. We should be doing all these things. But look how few of us there are as a percentage of the population. That that sure we're growing in numbers, but not in sufficient numbers to be able to counter what's going on. Um, so I'm thinking, yeah, do what you can, do everything you can, but accept that if this is a spiritual war we're fighting as well, and it is, there's another key element, and you've got to recognize that um, stuff like the power of prayer, that prayer's not an optional extra. Um, you need to be, I mean, you'd think that God doesn't need any help, he being God and all that, that he's won. And he kind of has. I mean, it has been so written. He will win. But the nature of the deal we have on earth is um, the whole setup that God organized when he decided to give us free will and stuff. There's a lot of latitude for um, Satan and his hordes, for example, get a lot of latitude, and the forces of right and truth and justice need a bit of help from us. You know, we don't just sit around passively growing organic vegetables. We also have a spiritual duty as well. We should be spiritual warriors, and I think our duty as spiritual warriors includes stuff like prayer, um, evangelism to a degree. bringing other people over to Christ, um, and doing the kind of stuff that good Christians should do. Um, I think every time you do a Christian act, the devil gets a slap in the face. Every time you forgive somebody, every time you enact a random act of kindness to a stranger, every time you act selflessly, these are things they really hurt the dark forces, I reckon.
One last thing we talked about it earlier, and I want to come back to it for a second, is the whole dinosaurs. 'Cause I've never heard this before. You don't believe in
Oh, did you
dinosaurs?
know? Oh, you didn't know that dinosaurs weren't real?
No.
Great
You gonna
rabbit
tell me
hole.
Santa Claus isn't real either?
Yeah,
No, honestly,
Satan taught.
I've never the dinosaur. I've just never
You
heard that
know,
before.
just on the Santa Claus thing, you think everyone goes, yeah, have you noticed it's an anagram of Satan? You think that's by accident? Or just they take the second most important event in the Christian calendar, arguably, and they turn it into this festival of greed and
Gluttony,
and
gluttony.
yeah, gluttony and yeah, exactly. Dinosaurs. So the dinosaurs scam started in the 19th century at about the same time they were starting to push Darwinism. They needed to up the ante. They needed to the beginning of the Enlightenment, the so-called Enlightenment, had been they'd laid their groundwork, but they really needed to up the ante. They needed to kind of kill Christianity as a kind of as a thing in the culture. So they recruited Darwin to work on his Origin of Species and put together this bullshit argument about how like we all evolved from the primordial slime and we used to be monkeys once and I mean this is taught in schools now as fact, but there was a period not so long ago where this was considered quite contentious, or worse, because it is. I mean, it just doesn't stand up. It doesn't stand up mathematically. It doesn't stand up in terms of the fossil record or whatever. But at about the same time, I think there were two periods. I think one was in the 1820s and one maybe in the 1840s or the 1860s, where these these Barnum style showman dinosaur bone collectors from wealthy backgrounds went out into parts of America where they found these things, the so-called tar pits and stuff, where apparently all these dinosaurs had come to die, and so all these creatures which previous generations of naturalists and so on had never. You think about that. You think about the great collectors of the 18th century and beginning in the 17th century really was which was when people started putting together the basis of the Natural History Museum and the science the collection at Kew and stuff really started in about the sort of 1660s, 1670s, 1680s. That was when scholars started going around the world and working stuff out. So from then until about, say, 1800, nobody knew anything about these dinosaurs. They, no scholars would have been baffled if you'd told them. And then suddenly, come the 19th century, and these hucksters start coming back with these fragments of bone, which they magically managed to work out. This fragment is actually part of this huge beast with these huge teeth, and I'm going to call it Tyrannosaurus Rex. And I found these two other bones, and I reckon This probably belongs to a piece called a herbivorous beast called a brontosaurus, or maybe it's called a diplodocus, and it was about yay long and yay high, and so these hucksters, with the help of the scientific establishment, organizations like the Smithsonian Institute, which is so corrupt. The Smithsonian Institute is also the one that has covered up the existence of giants, because there were many, many giants in the world before the Smithsonian Institute hid all the bodies, hid all the bones. They perpetrated this hoax. So you had all these natural history museums appearing with wonderful dioramas of real life elephants and lions and stuff in their recreated habitat, which I love the dioramas at the Natural History Museum in New York, if they still exist. And then you had in these exhibition halls these completely fake things made of sort of 99% plaster cast, and a tiny bit of bone fragment, probably from an old rhino or a chicken or something, and 100% pure imagination. That's what dinosaurs are like. By the way, I do think the word dragons, um, which is which doesn't contradict what I'm saying. I don't believe there were ankylosaurus and uh, velociraptors and all the kind of crap you see in Steven Spielberg. Steven Spielberg is a great architect of lies. He's like, we talk about Leni Riefenstahl, but there's probably never been a greater propagandist for the evil elites than Spielberg in his war narratives and his science fiction narratives and his whatever. Um, but yeah, so I do think that I do believe that dragons existed because they appear in too many cultures, too many distinct, discrete cultures for them not to have. Why would the Chinese have all those characters in their zodiac and only one of them is not real? Why would that be? I think the dragons were driven to extinction by humans, as they would be. I mean, because they're probably a nuisance.
Um, yeah, I've never heard that before in regards to dinosaurs. I
There's no
don't.
going back.
You know,
Oh, you see, there are other tales as well. As with any conspiracy theory, there are different ways in. So there's the one I gave you about the story of the people who invented dinosaurs. But there are other tales as well. You think about it, what what do most children have on their pajamas and on their bed sheets and stuff? It's either dinosaurs or spacemen. So why do they go for this one early on, so early on? You, I've got this I call it Delingpole. I can't remember if it's Delingpole's first law or Delingpole's second law, but it's something like the more they tell you that something is true, the more insistently they do so, the less likely it is that it's true. So you think about all the things that they bombard us with in our culture. Evolutionary theory, inescapable. It's everywhere. It informs everything. So that's bullshit. Dinosaurs. Little kids are encouraged to be obsessed with dinosaurs and to name them and to know what they look like and stuff. That's going to be bullshit. Spacemen, bullshit. Titanic didn't hit an iceberg. World War II, everything about that's a lie. And so it goes on. That we are run by people who have maintained their power over millennia using deception as their primary tool, deception and propaganda, just like on us. And deception is probably their main method of control.
I gotta have you back on, James. We could talk more about this. We could spend another 2 hours talking about some of this.
Yeah, I can talk about this stuff. It is probably time for me to have my cup of tea now. And yeah, It's been great talking to you, Mike. I hope I haven't bored your listeners.
No, not at all. Where could people find you?
Well, I do this podcast, which I think it's all right. I think it's good. Um, and it's called the Delingpod, and that's spelt Delingpod. And the reason it's called the Delingpod is because my name is James Delingpole, so it's got pod instead of Delingpole. And I'm on Substack and I'm on Locals and Subscribestar and Patreon. I sort of don't expect people to come and instantly subscribe to me because obviously that's quite a big ask. But it'd be nice if people came and checked out what I do, and then if they do like it, then to maybe consider supporting me financially. I suppose I do two things. Apart from my podcast, which you'll find at the usual places, Apple Podcasts, and they like most podcasters, I have this sort of model where subscribers get early access, and then I release them to the world. I'm not much on YouTube, except I think my Psalms podcast. I do a series on the Psalms, which is different. If you're into Christianity, or even if you're not, actually, they're quite interesting. I'm on places like Rumble, BitChute we used to use, but I don't think we can anymore because it's been banned in the UK. Or BitChute have taken themselves away from the UK. I'm still on Apple Podcasts. I'm still on what's the what's the main one on your phone?
Spotify.
Spotify. That's the one. Yeah.
And then
So I'm there.
Your X handle.
Oh, I think I used to be. I'm at JMC Delingpole. I used to be something else, but then I got somebody stole my identity and started selling bullshit crypto on it. So that was no good. Yeah. So try and track down my stuff and see if you like it, and if you do, consider supporting me. Yeah, and my Substack essays are pretty good as well. Because I mean that was how I started out as a journalist. I can write. I'm readable.
I agree with you. You're very readable, and I encourage people to go out and support James for what he's doing, all the work he's doing, both on his podcast and in his writing. And when's your next podcast, and who's on deck for you?
I can never remember because I think I do two, I don't know how many podcasts you do. I do like two a week, which I think is almost too many.
I try to do 4 or 6, but I don't write. I'm not a writer. You're a writer. I don't.
You may, yeah. I suppose my excuse is that I am writing. I do essays, and I am writing a book at the moment, which I want to get out quite soon, called White Pilled, which is about my Christian journey through down the rabbit hole. It's like my awakening as a conspiracy theorist, so called, and as a Christian, and about the parallels between them. It's going to be a crazy ride. Yeah, that's what I do.
James, I appreciate it. Thank you for speaking with me. Love this conversation. Love to have you back on, and I look forward
Thank
to.
you.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say thank you. I really appreciate you asking me, and I'm glad you could track me down. And I'd love to come back. So thank you.
Mic drop.